I want you all to imagine something. Imagine in your house right now is this big game case with hundreds of games ranging from today's latest and greatest all the way back to the classics from the mid 2000s. Now, because of some weird legal ruling, a bunch of government agents come into your house and take everything. Doesn't matter who you complain to, who you beg for help, who you talk to, you can only ever recover a tiny fraction of these games. While this scenario will never happen in the United States, the door for it to happen has been opened at least digitally when it comes to certain lawsuits here in the US, the EU, and over in the UK. This video is about Valve, Steam's history, its rise, and the current lawsuit-happy climate that Valve finds themselves in. Okay, yeah, I'll admit, I was being overly dramatic with that one. This scenario is extremely unlikely to happen, mainly because governments really like that Valve tax money. If you've been gaming for any length of time on PC, you know what Steam is. Steam is so ubiquitous with gaming that we just assume every PC gamer is going to have it installed. I'd bet everyone watching this has been to a nerd convention like Comic-Con or Anime Expo, or like a Dungeons & Dragons game, and you've just asked for somebody's Steam ID without even knowing if they're a PC gamer or not. I guarantee you a large portion of the people watching this video right now have a huge amount of games in their Steam library which they have never played, and an even bigger amount in their Steam library which they have not beaten yet. Throughout this video, I'm going to be throwing out a term, and a lot of people are going to get a little angry at this term because you may not fully understand the nuanced definition I'm going to be using. That term is de facto monopoly. In this version of it, it's better described as an innocent monopoly. A good example of what an innocent monopoly is the very, very early days of YouTube. Back then, you had several streaming services, Newgrounds included. Basically, in 2007 to 2008, everyone just went to YouTube because it was better. And back then, it was pretty much as innocent as it can be, and, well, let's just say it's not as innocent as it used to be. But at least it's not a monopoly, because, hey, if you get banned from YouTube, you still have other options like Vimeo, Facebook. Illegal monopolies, while also de facto, are ones which exist through shady practices, buying out the competition, or predatory pricing. One perfect example of this is if, a company makes something and then sells it for less than it costs to make it so that they can either drive out the competition or, lower their value enough that they can just buy them out. In my opinion, Steam is the perfect example of an innocent de facto monopoly because it gained its status by having the most convenient, community-friendly, and groundbreaking features on top of its amazing sales. Plus, you had the excellent customer service, at least once they allowed for, the refunds, and you've probably seen all the videos and memes about how they recover people's accounts, and it's just some of the most hilarious things. When your service is this good that people make positive memes about it, you know that you're on the good side here. And Steam, it gained its status by being the best, not because they pushed out the competition or ran any kind of predatory pricing. There is one caveat to that. I was going to put this much later in the video, but right now there are way too many news stories about Valve, and there's a lot of claims that Valve are forcing every single game to be sold on every single platform for the exact same price. That's simply not true. Okay, so we're going to be doing this part live. I'm not going to be cutting the audio. This is going to be raw, unfiltered, so I apologize for the quality of the audio. This is GOG here, and this is Steam, obviously. It is currently June 7th. I suck at calendars, apparently. We're going to start here on the deals page of GOG, and we're just going to look through here. Okay, so we got Blood West Gold Edition. This is... Okay, that's a bundle for just shy of $20. I saw some other games I want to look up too. Now, I already know these Metro games are the same price because I saw them on the front page of Steam. They're the same price already, so we don't have to look those up. I'm going to ignore that game. All right, so Trials of Mana, and I saw another. Okay, Legends of Mana, Trials of Mana, $15 and $12 themselves, and this bundle deal I wanted to look up, just shy of $20, $19.79. Okay, so we got a few games we can look up. So of Mana. Okay, so Trials and Legend, significantly more expensive on Steam. Let's look up that Blood West game. Here we go. The bundle deal is more expensive. Yeah, it's more expensive, guys. It's more expensive by like 80 cents. Yeah, if you want to pay 80 cents more to get the Steam edition, there you go. Wow, okay. I'm doing this live. So there's two games I'm going to be looking up. These are two of my favorite games. One of them is The Long Dark. I don't have it on PC. I played the hell out of it on PlayStation. The other one is called Beyond a Steel Sky. This is a newer game I recently found on GOG, and I just fell in love with it because it's a really, really fun game, and it's a crime more people haven't heard of this game, but we're going to look both of these up real quick. So, Beyond a Steel Sky. Okay, so $7 for the base game. I can get a bundle. No, I can't get a bundle with this with the soundtrack, but who actually wants a soundtrack, right? $7. Oh yeah, it looks like it's the same price on Steam here. So yeah, I'm doing this live, so you know, same price. Let's look at The Long Dark. Why is that Gunnar game always in the top? I don't play Gunnar games here. If I'm gonna play a Gunnar game, I download them from other sources. The Long Dark. Okay, this comes in a bundle deal. Looks hard. Okay, Frostpunk. Yeah, I own that game. So $50 for the bundle, 10% off of that, or 20% off of that. 10% is $5, so 20% would be $10. Okay, $40. If you don't own Frostpunk, this will cost you $40. Let's check GOG. Okay, so this is significantly more expensive on GOG, $35. Now, if you already own Frostpunk, you're only going to be paying $16, or yeah, $16. If you don't, you're going to be paying $40. So it's technically $5 more expensive, but you get two games out of it. If you want Frostpunk, get this bundle deal. If you don't, you know, if you're never going to play it, then get it on GOG, you know. But yeah, this is just an example of just a few games. I could keep going on and on. This is just to show that not every game is the same price on Steam as it is on GOG.
So as you just saw, I searched up several games. Several of them were cheaper on GOG. Some of them were cheap. One of them, at least, was cheaper on Steam. And one of them, one of my favorite games ever, you know, Beyond a Steel Sky, was actually the exact same price. If you're sitting there confused, it's not your fault. You read the same news stories I have. The fact of the matter is, Valve has never officially made it a policy that you have to sell your games for the same price. They've only made it an official policy if you wish to sell your game with a Steam key. Meaning, if you want to sell your game and have all of the community and IT updating and, you know, infrastructure features of the Steam platform, you have to sell it for the same price. If you wish to sell it standalone or through another storefront without a Steam key, you can sell it for whatever you want, as we just saw. However, one of the central claims to the lawsuits here in the US, the EU, and the UK is that Valve are unofficially forcing price parity through back channels, emails, telephones, things like that. One of the claims is that, you know, emails have been sent that if you don't price it for the same price, we're going to pull your game off Steam, or we're going to stop supporting it, or, you know, publishing it.
basically meaning the only way you're going to find it is if you actively search it up. There is another claim that I actually don't care about because I actually support Steam on this one, or Valve on this one. Some claim that after they put their price cheaper on like Epic or GOG, their game disappeared off the front page of Steam. Yeah, no, that makes sense. The front page of Steam is a powerful advertising tool. If you get pushed into the spotlight by Steam's front page, it's kinda on you if you get pulled for selling cheaper somewhere else. Steam's front page is the most powerful free advertising you will ever receive, and you are a fool to abuse it. Again, this section I was going to put much later in the video, but this is such a hot button topic right now with the news, I had to put it this early. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get back on the topic of Steam and how they found themselves as the current kings of the PC marketplace. To understand how Steam gained its innocent de facto monopoly status, we actually gotta go back in time here. Way back to pre-2006, before the Xbox 360, before the PS3, before broadband was normalized, and before updating a PC game was anything close to easy. If you didn't game on a PC back then, you never had to experience the absolute hell of early patching. Specifically, I'm talking about error messages such as CRC check failed or MD5 hash failures, and every other variation of this error that would make these early patchers just fail out. Essentially, if your family computer looked anything like this growing up, there's a good chance you know exactly what I'm talking about. Side note, if your family PC looked like that growing up, your mom definitely sold Avon. And if you were in the South, half those CDs were religious. But anyways, back then, games didn't download 3 to 4 gigs of data. They downloaded a 30 to 50 megabyte patcher that would just rewrite files on your hard drive. Back then, you couldn't just download several gigs of data to update your games because internet service back then was not as good as it... Well, it was more shit than it is today. Basically, you just downloaded this small file patcher and it would just rewrite everything. But because early hard drives sucked, especially certain brands, you would get a lot of low-level data corruption, and you would get these aforementioned errors, which just basically make it fail out. And if you search MD5 hash fail or CRC check failed errors, I guarantee you can find some old internet forums from back then lamenting about this exact same issue. I could explain this whole technical process, or I could just tell you about one day of my experience with one particular video game, Battlefield 2. And I want to be clear here. I'm the guy who took apart the family computer growing up. In my current job, I am a network administrator, and I started out at the help desk. Basically, I'm the guy who had to figure out how to do all of this by reading internet forums from back then and piecing together my own way of doing this. Not because I didn't know what I was doing. With that out of the way, this particular story is just one patch day when I was 19 years old. At the time, I worked at Walmart, and on this particular day, I was a full-time, 8 hours, 2 breaks, and a lunch. To give you an example of how I was able to do what I'm going to explain here, the house I lived in at the time, the backyard had a back gate which led directly to the back lot of the Walmart where I worked. Instead of driving, horribly designed roads, a 10-minute drive, I literally just walked out through the back gate of my backyard, climbed over a 2-foot retaining wall, and just walked in through the back door and clocked in. So, this particular day, I woke up early, I downloaded the patcher, and I started the patching process. On my first break, I come home and I find that the patcher had failed out at around 20 to 25%. It gave me this very specific file that it failed on. Usually it was like C:/, program files, x86, EA Battlefield, yada 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 yada. I navigated to the relevant file folder, deleted the offending file, and started the patcher over again. I went back to work, and when I came home from lunch, I did the exact same thing, and as my lunch break ended, I was able to do it one more time, return to work. I did it again on my final break for the day, and when I came home from work that day, the patcher had finished out at 100%. But I couldn't play Battlefield 2 yet. No. If I tried that, I would get a ton of graphical errors and it would corrupt those files again, and I would have to start that entire process over. No, once it finished out, I had to run the patcher one more time. After all of that, I would finally be able to play Battlefield 2. Any patch day where I didn't work, I just loaded up Halo 2 on my Xbox while the patcher did its thing. This entire process I described, if I didn't work, it took me 3 to 5 hours. And this was the fast method because, believe it or not, the official forums, their response was to just reinstall. I don't know why I did that voice there. I am so sorry. Basically, they said reinstall the game. But the problem with reinstalling the game is you couldn't just reinstall the game. You had to reinstall the game, then the 1.0, 1.1 patcher, 1.2 patcher, 1.3 patcher. You see where I'm going with this. This is what I and many other people had to deal with for games such as Battlefield 2, Company of Heroes, Command & Conquer Generals, and I think the very early days of EverQuest had these issues. And speaking of other MMOs, if you're wondering why MMOs used to take, a billion years to update back then, it's because they were avoiding this error. Final Fantasy XI downloaded every single file one by one from a single overloaded server. If you remember 19-hour updates, you remember the Play Online era. And WoW wasn't any better. It used BitTorrent-based patching, which, yeah, more advanced, but just about every major ISP throttled peer-to-peer traffic back then, and, home routers almost always sucked at it. When Steam started supporting these third-party titles with centralized distribution and automatic updates, this went from a constant complaint to a forgotten relic pretty much overnight. Well, between the years of 2007 to 2009 at least. As for MMOs, it would take a few more years for this to, catch up, but very recently with Final Fantasy XIV, the Dawntrail expansion took me 45 minutes to download and install. Today with Steam, you can literally just update your games while you're sleeping. And this was just the beginning, because soon after, you had the community features. Pretty much from 2007 onwards, Steam started introducing many features such as achievements, game time tracking, friends list, Steam group, Steam chat, Steam voice chat, streaming your games to your friends, chat emojis, gift support, and many, many more. Steam was quickly becoming a place where you had an identity and a community, and not just a place you stuck your credit card into. On top of community features, you also had Steam keys on physical discs. In the late 2000s, Steam released Steamworks, or for us, basically, when you bought a disc at Walmart, you could plug the code into Steam and get a digital copy. And for some of these games, you could actually double dip. Me and some friends would go halvesies. Like, I would pay 20, he would pay 20, because games back then were 40. And he would get the physical disc, and I would get the Steam code. Or, just wait for him to go to the bathroom after Taco Bell and, take a picture of all of his PC games with your Motorola Razr and get a bunch of free games. He never knew. Steamworks CD keys were eventually phased out in 2013 to 2015-ish, but these old codes still work. Now, Steamworks still exists, but it's mainly for digital keys. But while I was recording this video, I actually was cleaning out my closet and I found an old copy of Fear 2 Project Origin. The discs were cracked and shattered, but the Steam code on it actually worked when I plugged it into Steam. On top of these features, Steam had the Steam sales. Basically, Steam had a few minor sales before that big one in 2009, but 2009, they shocked and delighted everyone with their first major sale. And again in 2010, with Steam giving us the first theme Steam sale, which included things like flash sales and daily deals. This trend continued probably just over 6 years to, I think, mid-2016. See, unfortunately, while these sound good, Valve learned the hard way you can't just have big sales and change the price of certain items on a whim. For those that never saw these, Steam would take a game that's 30% off and offer a flash sale for only a few hours, reducing the price down to 80% off. For those that aren't keeping track, essentially, we had to refresh the Steam store again and again and again growing up. And if you were at your job, if your job was cool, you had the Steam app on your phone and you could do it there, but most of us would get fired if we had our phones out. So people lost out on sales. And on top of that, you had people that would buy it, like myself. I bought The Witcher 3 during the Black Friday sale, and essentially, I think a few hours later, a flash sale went off, basically making the game go to half of what I paid for it. I had no choice but to refund the game and buy it at its better price, which Valve, Best Buy has had partial refunds for sales since like the 90s. You really need to get with the times here. Essentially, if you're not smelling what I'm stepping in, all of the customer complaints on this, plus the, the fees from, refunding and rebuying, is the reason why this went away. On top of that, like, if you need a strategy guide for a game sale, your game sale is a little complicated. Outside of these few minor gripes, Steam quickly set themselves out to be the good guys on the block here. But it wasn't until about 2013 to 2015-ish did we see Steam become the #1 king that it is today for PC distribution sales. Before that, it was actually physical stores. And let me tell you something right now. When physical stores were dethroned, publishers and developers were in love with Steam. Especially that 30% fee, because when they were in stores, publishers had to pay a lot more than 30%. Before the shift, retail stores were the undisputed kings for PC game sales. If you're wondering whatever happened in 2013 to 2015 to dethrone retail as the kings, well, to answer that, I have one question for you. When was the last time you saw a PC sold with a disk drive? PC games were a few years early for this, but the death of physical media saw the death of in-store sales, and many publishers and devs loved that 30% split. You heard me right. They loved the 30% fee because brick-and-mortar stores cost you much more than simply 30%. For those who never worked in retail or the distribution side of the industry, you simply don't know about the hidden costs. A little disclaimer here, the examples I'm giving here are for easy math. If you check actual historical records from this, you're going to find wildly varying numbers on the retail profit share. So let's say you're a developer and you want to sell your big game, next big game #1 in retail stores. You might be thinking you only need that 30% fee, right? Just $18 off my $60 game, right? No. On top of this fee, you also had to pay a distributor. Because you couldn't just go up to a retailer and say, hey, put my game on your shelf. I mean, you could, but that required a giant hassle of negotiation, and honestly, it was easier and cheaper to pay a distributor to do this for you. For the hypothetical fee, let's call this 10 to 13% or another $7 off. You also had manufacturing and shipping. These varied wildly between like $1 and $5, so let's just call these $3 for each, so another $6 off. Then you had a hidden fee that almost no one knows about. Retail paid $42 for your game, but let's say a few years later they have a bunch on store shelves that's just not moving. What happens when they want to sell it at a discount? Who pays that extra fee? Because it's not the retailers, it's you. All in all, this fee, while it varied wildly, let's just call this another 10 to 13% if you average it out over every unit sold, or essentially another $7. By comparison, Steam charges a 30% fee. No distribution, no shelf, no manufacturing, pretty much any other fee. They even eat the payment processor fees out of the 30%. You pay a total of $18 for a $60 game. It's essentially the difference between losing 30% and losing 60%, hypothetically, of course. These numbers are just there for easy math. Also, this is strangely relevant to an earlier part of the video. Before anyone says Steam is uniquely evil for trying to control pricing, every major retailer has pretty much done the same thing for decades. You can find plenty of stories about big box stores demanding massive price cuts, sometimes 70 to 80% off, if a manufacturer of a physical good wanted shelf space. Look up stories of Target or Walmart forcing people to sell things which normally cost $50 to $70 for like $12 to $15 if they wanted in their stores. As for Steam's 30% cut though, that 30% doesn't look that bad when you compare these figures, because with retail, you're keeping roughly $22 with these hypothetical numbers, whereas with Steam, you're keeping $42 per unit. Because of this horrible revenue split, By and large, pretty much every developer and publisher back then loved Steam and their 30% revenue split. But that love would soon fade. I was going to avoid this topic entirely because it gets me angry, but you can't talk about the sudden shift against Steam in the media without bringing up the Epic Games Store. I'd be doing this video a grave injustice if I didn't flesh out Epic as a counterpoint to Steam, because its history is almost the antithesis of Steam in practice, reality, and policy. Early December 2018 saw the launch of Epic Games Store, a move widely praised by gamers in the gaming media. I myself was watching the Game Awards live and saw this and was very happy that we had some real competition to Steam. There were several other YouTubers who were watching this live and, they had very similar reactions. Hey, cool, another competitor to Steam. Less than 12 hours later, everyone soon learned that Hades was going to be exclusive to the Epic Games Store with many other games soon to follow. Epic turned themselves into a PC gaming pariah. Epic brought something we'd only ever seen with first-party titles: storefront exclusivity. Now, storefront exclusivity wasn't in itself new. We all knew we had to go to Origin for EA titles, Battle.net for Blizzard. But what we never had to do was purchase a third-party title through one of these stores because it was available everywhere. When I say gamers were not having it, that's an understatement. The Fuck Epic subreddit exploded with hundreds of thousands of users. News stories questioned whether this was necessary. Hundreds of YouTubers, gaming channels, tech channels, and even some gun tubers called Epic out for this shady business practice. I specifically remember one very angry video game YouTuber ranting for 10 straight minutes or more about how Epic could have been the hero here, but instead made themselves out to be the villain from day one. The message to gamers was clear. Epic wanted to break this Steam's de facto monopoly, but they were using the worst possible method, forcing your interaction. Before this, if you didn't like a store's rules, policies, or features, you could just take your ball and go home. Not with Epic. You were forced to play in their parking lot because they hadn't even finished building the goddamn ball field yet. And yeah, we're gonna get into that one. Less than a month later, Tim Sweeney and Epic flipped the script. The Verge posted an article praising Epic's 12% fee, painting them as the good guys, and they were just the beginning. The floodgates soon opened. Dozens of articles popped up decrying Steam's 30% cut. It felt like I couldn't go 5 minutes without seeing another of these 30% versus 12% comparison videos or news stories. Then came a flurry of Twitter threads, Reddit posts, YouTube video, and social media takes propping Epic up as some kind of folk hero here, some even calling them an underdog. Guys, they're a multi-billion-dollar company. They are the furthest thing from the underdog. I could go on a long rant about the media campaign, but I'll just say this. What Epic did to flip the script was a mastercraft class in Machiavellianism. But again, gamers were still not having it. Let's look at some sales numbers. It's hard to determine exact sales across Steam versus Epic, but we do have a couple of solid examples. Satisfactory launched as an Epic exclusive for 15 months. In that time, it sold just shy of 1 million copies. We don't know the total Steam numbers, but we do know that it sold 368,000 units in Steam in the first month alone. One of the first Epic exclusives, Hades, is even funnier. They had to combine Epic and Switch sales together to get a number that was half of what was sold on Steam. I want you to imagine in an alternate timeline where Epic didn't force exclusives and tried to compete naturally. Their service sucked. But hey, don't take my word for it. Take the word of Epic Games Store VP Stephen Allison in a February 2026 Eurogamer article, "The launcher sucks, let's call it what it is." It took Epic over 3 years to add basic features. What features, you might ask? A shopping cart. 3 years for a damn shopping cart. 3.5 years for user reviews, and they didn't even do those right. You can only leave a star rating, no written reviews. The amount of Epic features missing at launch was astounding. When you compare the features that Steam has versus Epic, the amount of missing features is actually too long for me to talk about in this video, so I'm just going to let this list scroll. Instead of forcing exclusives, if Epic had simply copied all of Steam's features one for one, it would have been a much more forgivable experience. But let's be honest here. Steam did not create most of those features. They copied them from AOL, the Instant Messenger, and Yahoo Instant Messenger for the chat features. The part I can never agree with, though, is how when gamers didn't use Epic, the narrative shifted to blaming the customer base. Epic's response made it feel that we, the gamers, were the bad guys here. I personally don't like being called an enemy for my choice of free commerce. I know I've talked a lot about Epic here, but they're the perfect foil to compare to Steam. Their rise has been the exact opposite of Steam's. In reality, Epic launched in a feature anemic state, clearly prioritized profits over features and customer satisfaction. If it weren't for the exclusives and free games, I completely believe that Epic Game Store would have been thrown onto the pile of failed Steam competitors within the first few years. And on that note, I gotta be honest here. I intentionally skipped over some important historical context until this point in the video. Because when you talk about Steam, you have to talk about the rise of Epic, and you actually have to talk about all of the failed Steam competitors that died off in the 2010s. Impulse, later rebranded to GameStop PC Downloads, went defunct in 2014-ish, locking you out of all your purchases forever. Yes, GameStop, a store that distributes games, literally stopped distributing games. Desura, I think it was 2017 that they were gone, essentially locking you out of everything forever. GameTap went bye-bye in 2015. It was a subscription service though, so there weren't that many permanent purchases, but if you bought them, they were gone. Indie Game Stand shut down in like 2017, and anyone who didn't manually download the DRM-free installers lost access permanently. Steam's biggest early competitor here, Direct to Drive, lost to Steam after Steam rolled out its community features. Many of the old games from that service are just gone. Some were recovered, but you can still find old news stories of Reddit of people furious because they lost several games that they paid for. And this one actually hurts because while Steam focused on identity and community and social features, Direct to Drive focused on having the best prices. By and large, if there was a sale, you could find it cheaper on Direct to Drive. They are the perfect example of how being the cheapest isn't always the winning strategy. And then there's Games for Windows Live. This shut down in like 2013 or 2014. If you can find your old login, you might recover a few of these titles through Microsoft, but most won't run. The auth server is gone, and there are a few Haggy bypasses, but honestly, you're better off procuring your intellectual rights acquired totally ethically. Or just go to Half Price Books and find old game discs. I'm not your dad. When the storefronts failed, you didn't see a massive media campaign against Steam. You saw some, but most people were just repeating the same line. Shoulda copied Steam. Even news articles covering these shutdowns echoed Reddit and Twitter sentiments of the time. Some developers behind these stores even admitted they should have copied Steam's community and social features back in the early 2010s. In fact, the only real competitor to Steam that still exists today is GOG, and they focus on older games and classic games preservation. But let's refocus a bit. The point of this video isn't fuck Epic. We're PC gamers. We feel that down in our bones.
I can feel it all the way down in my plums.
It's not to sing Steam's praises either. The point is to show why Steam succeeded the way it did, and showing Epic's failures, in my opinion, is the strongest way to illustrate how bad things could have been. But here is a chilling fact for all of you. Gabe Newell is currently 63 years old. What happens when, not if, Gabe Newell retires or, heaven forbid, passes away? We all like to think that Steam will remain this pillar of the community it is today. But history is full of companies that for decades were beloved by employees and the customer base before a sudden shift. Take Walmart. After the death of Sam Walton? Honestly, that's all I gotta say. General Electric. Later leadership transformed GE from a company famous for engineering and industrial innovation into one increasingly focused on financial services. General Electric sold people money. For some reason, they heavily scaled that back in 2008. I wonder why.
And while William Boeing severed ties with its company in the 1930s, it can be argued his positive influence over corporate culture and legacy lasted long after his death. At least until the 1997 merger with McDonnell Douglas, and that can be argued as one of the many we really don't need to talk about Boeing anymore. All of this is to say, the industry needs more than just one major platform, as Gabe Newell won't be CEO of Valve forever, and if history repeats itself, future generations will not grow up with the same Steam experience we enjoy today. Remember that scenario from the beginning, the one where Steam shuts down and you lose your entire library overnight? That outcome likely will never happen, but the fact that these lawsuits open the door to this is kind of the entire point. Now, I need to be clear here. I'm not blaming Epic for these current lawsuits. While Tim Sweeney is very likely happy to see Valve raked over the coals here, he is not the reason these lawsuits exist, or at least I hope he isn't. In my opinion, Epic's 2019 manufacturing of online outrage and years of portraying Steam as an evil monopoly that crushed every competitor has helped create a climate where many people now assume Valve must be doing something illegal simply because they're the market leader. The opening scenario where you lose hundreds of games forever is just an extreme example to illustrate why these cases matter. Realistically, the only way anything close to that would happen is if Valve were to go out of business and join the pile of failed PC game platforms I mentioned earlier. For those of us old enough to remember Steam's rise, this hatred is new, confusing, and oftentimes makes no logical sense. Between hacked accounts being restored, refunds being introduced, shipping problems being made right, and countless customer-friendly news stories over the years, I just don't buy the narrative that Valve is some cartoonishly evil monopoly overlord of PC gaming they are portrayed in the media. Looking back at the mid-2010s, Steam's competitors weren't destroyed, they just died. Quietly. Nobody protested Impulse, nobody marched in the streets for Desura, nobody held a candlelight vigil for GameTap, and we certainly weren't raging at Steam for quote-unquote killing Direct-to-Drive. We all said the same thing. You should have copied Steam. Steam didn't win because it cheated. Steam won because, for most gamers at least, it was simply the better product. Better features, better service, better sales, better convenience. That's my definition of an innocent de facto monopoly. A company that became dominant because they overwhelmingly were chosen by the people. Not because... not because they forced your interactions. I'm going to leave you with one simple thought. If in your travels, if you ever meet somebody who refuses to use Steam or has stopped using Steam because it's a monopoly, essentially refusing their service because they see Steam as this evil monopolistic company, then ask them one simple question. Then why are you still using Discord? This video definitely got away from me, but thanks for sticking around if you did. I hope you enjoyed it or at least learned something from it. If you disagree with me or want to talk about any other gaming monopolies, drop a comment down below. I'm Lightning, a loudmouth know-it-all from the internet. Have a good day.